Hello, my name's Renate Hughes and I both live and work in Glenorchy, as do my family. So both my parents live in Glenorchy, as do 2 of my daughters and 4 of my grandchildren. And the story that I'm going to tell you today is the story of how we all came to be here and live in this wonderful city. First of all, I'm going to show you a picture. And this picture is of a very fashionable model wearing an outfit very similar to one that my mother created. So now I'm going to tell you the story of how we all got here. My mother was a quite famous milliner in Berlin, both before and during the war, and less so after the war because of a shortage of materials. She made some hats for some really famous actresses, and she used to hand sew all of her hats, and she made a costume very similar to this one. Anyway, my mum was working in Berlin and had no intentions of getting married or settling down because she was having a lot of fun. She would go out dancing till 4 a.m, wearing pencil marks up her back leg to pretend that she had stockings on because there was such a shortage of them during the war. And a long way away in England was my father, who joined the army, and he was actually sent to Germany, and he was in the military police, so he wasn't fighting with a gun, but he was actually guarding people. And as the war was coming to an end, he was appointed to guard war criminals while they went through war trials, and that was right in the middle of Berlin. And so he was stationed there and didn't know anybody. He came to Berlin, he said he had 1 shirt, 1 pair of trousers, 1 tie, 1 pair of shoes, and he was a very thin and very pale man. My mother's mother was a fire warden in Berlin all during the war, and she had to evacuate buildings, and at the end of the war she was still a fire warden, and she met my father in her role as a fire warden when he was doing a patrol and moving some criminals from one court back to the jail. And she said to him, "You are a very thin Englishman, you need to come home with me." So she actually took him home to feed him, and he met my mother, and he said that he fell in love with her the very first time that he saw her, and he would not leave her alone. My mother, on the other hand, said that she did not like him at all and thought that he was a skinny, pale Englishman and had no interest. So my mother's mother, being a fire warden, kept bringing him home to eat. And my mother said that literally in the end she gave up because he would not go away. He used to say it was because of my Ima's cooking, but I think it was because he was in love with my mother. So they actually married. They had 2 weddings, one in Berlin and then another one back in England where my dad's from. And you think, well, how does this bring them to Tasmania? So what did they do? They decided that they wanted to have a new life and a new start. And so they became, after quite a long period of time, they decided that they would become £10 migrants. And they come out on a £10 scheme. That means that they came out on a plane called the British Eagle, and for their £10 they were allowed to bring 1 Indian tea chest, and that was the only possessions they were allowed to bring. That came by ship and took 3 months, and then they were given these £10 plane tickets. And so by then my brother and I had been born. We all got on the plane, and they told us we were flying to this place called Tasmania, and my mother thought it was Tanzania. So they were looking up these spots on the map and they couldn't find them. And then people said, no, it's Tasmania, it's here. And there was this tiny little dot at the other end of the world, really. And so they all got on the plane, and very brave of them, and came all the way out to Tasmania. Our first week here was very exciting because we had the bushfires. And I'd never seen the bush before, but I'd certainly never seen a bushfire. And then they moved to Glenorchy, where they've lived ever since. And where, as I said, I now live and work very proudly. And 2 of my daughters live in Glenorchy with their families, and 4 of my children and my 2 sons live in other suburbs. So that's the story of how I got to Glenorchy and got to live and work here. And I'm really thankful that that my Oma brought my skinny, pale English father home to meet my mother.